Hello and welcome back to Physical Geology. I am Robert Lopez, your instructor. Today I want to continue on with the Minerals Lab, and we're looking here at Activity 1.3, the hardness of minerals. Remember, the hardness of a mineral is its resistance to scratching, and harder materials or minerals will scratch softer ones. And we use this Mohs hardness scale, which ranks the minerals from 1 to 10. And it's sort of a relative scale because you'll see that hardness 10, for example, diamond, is like 8,000 times harder than talc, which is hardness 1, baby powder. So it's not a linear scale, is what I want you to know. Other important things that we look at is we try to separate the minerals into soft minerals versus hard minerals. The breaking point is 5.5, which is the hardness of a knife blade or a glass plate. They're similar hardness. In fact, there's an important table here to take a note, and this shows the minerals that are ranked from diamond being the hardest to talc being the softest, and then soft minerals will be less than 5.5, which is the glass or the knife blade here, and then minerals that are hard would be greater or would not be able to scratch the glass plate. For example, this image of pyrite, you see it scratching the glass plate. Well, that's telling us that pyrite is a hard mineral. A very common mineral is quartz. Quartz should also scratch the glass plate because it has a hardness of 7, harder than the glass plate. For example, talc, gypsum, calcite, fluorite, all those will not scratch the glass plate. So that's something to think about when we're looking at these minerals. So we'll be using that porcelain street plate, the glass plate, our fingernail is important because our fingernail is hardness 2.5. You can also use a wire nail, a brass penny here, about hardness 3. So different tools you can use here. So first thing we want to do when we look at these minerals, we want to see if one will scratch the other as our procedure. So we're going to try to scratch sample B with sample A. So let's take a look at these samples. So here are the mineral samples, and we're going to try to scratch sample B here with sample A. So here's sample A. And to do this, let's see if I can. And so you want to take a sharper corner of this mineral, like maybe this one here, and see if I can put a scratch on here. And I do see that I'm scratching this mineral. So sample A will scratch sample B. Now, so you want to say yes there. Now we'll see if sample E is scratched by sample F. So here's sample E, and you can see it's galena. It's that nice cubic cleavage there. And sample F here, which looks to be pyrite, and let's see if we get a scratch here. And let's zoom in. And you can see that scratch I put in there, and that scratch means that sample F is scratching sample E. So F is harder than E. A is harder than B. So that's something so we can start ranking them in that fashion there. So that's what they're going to ask us to do next here. They're going to ask us to rank minerals A, B, C, and D in order of hardness. And so we'll want to figure out what's the hardest mineral, then the next hardest, and then the softest. So we already tested that sample A can scratch sample B. Let's see if sample C here can scratch sample A. And I see right away that sample C is scratching sample A. So C is harder than A, and A is harder than B. Now the question is, where does sample D, the sample D over here, where would it fit in? So what we're going to try to do, first of all, let's see if sample D will scratch B. And I see right away that sample D is scratching sample B. So that means that sample D has to go, well, at least it's harder than B. Well, let's see if sample D will scratch sample A. And I do see a scratch. So D is scratching A. So now we know that D is at least, at least both C and D are scratching A. Well, let's see if A can scratch C over here. and it's not. Let's see if C can scratch D. And I do see a scratch there. C scratches D. So there's our rank. Basically, by scratching one mineral or just testing, we see that we get an order from hardest to softest. So that's what you want to record in your data table. So you'll finish this table here. Now we'll go on here, and now we're going to try to figure out using Mohs hardness scale to give each mineral a hardness. And sample A is going to be our hardest mineral. And we saw that it's, in fact, let's take a look at sample A and see what it does to the glass plate here. So sample A, it put a scratch in the glass plate. So you can see a little scratch right there. Yeah, so you can sort of see that scratch there. So that's telling us that, so we got a scratch on the plate, which is telling us that sample A is harder than the glass plate. We also, well, we want to test sample F, and sample F is pyrite, and that should also scratch. Yeah, and that's also producing a scratch right there. So sample F is also harder than the glass plate. Let's see if sample D will scratch a glass plate, and it's not. It's considerably softer. So we know that both C and F here are going to be harder than the glass plate, but D is softer than the glass plate. And then, so we're going to have some, so it's going to be less than 5.5. These are greater than 5.5. Sample C is quartz, so that's going to help us a little bit there with quartz. So we know quartz is hardness 7 based on Mohs hardness. Let's see if pyrite is harder. We'll see if pyrite can scratch the quartz. And it cannot. It will not scratch a quartz. But quartz, we'll see, should be able to scratch pyrite. Yeah, and I see that, I see a scratch. In fact, let's bring this up here. I see a scratch right there that quartz was able to scratch. In fact, quartz is able to scratch pyrite. So quartz is harder than pyrite. Pyrite is harder than 5.5. So now what I want you to do is, based on what we know, is that pyrite has to be less than 7, because quartz is 7, but harder than 5.5. So come up with a number for sample F. Now for these other ones, we know that they're less than 5.5. Now our job is to try to narrow down. Now I'm going to use a wire nail here to see if I can scratch sample 4. Remember, the wire nail is about 4.5. And I am putting a scratch on sample 4. So you see the little scratch right there. So I did put a scratch. So that's telling me that sample D is less than 4.5. I already know that sample D can scratch sample A. And so the next thing I'll have is my fingernail. My fingernail is hardness 2.5. And obviously I cannot scratch so that means that sample A is going to be harder than 2.5. Sample D is softer than 4.5. But but again, remember, sample D can scratch sample A. So again, you're going to assign some numbers based on those observations. Now for sample B, I can scratch it with my fingernail. So that's one of the characteristics of the sample B, is I can scratch it with a fingernail. So it's going to be softer than 2.5. It's not talc. Talc is hardest one, so it's going to be something a little bit different than that. But keep that in mind. This is going to be softer than 2.5. So give it a number. So now you can assign numbers to the different samples.